The transport shuddered as it entered the royal docking bay, and Captain Revik's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. 20 years of service had taught him that unscheduled arrivals meant trouble. The Zarathian Empire didn't tolerate chaos, especially not here, in the heart of the Empress's palace station orbiting the dead world of Krethis Prime. "Identify the vessel," he said, his voice cutting through the bay's ambient hum. "Human cargo freighter, designation Aurora's End," his lieutenant reported, fingers dancing across the holographic display. "Registry shows it's been operating in the outer colonies for the past decade." Captain filed a priority docking request citing medical emergency. Medical emergencies go to Bay 12, not the royal sector. "Yes, sir, but the captain specifically requested political asylum." Ravik's jaw tightened. Asylum requests were rare. Asylum requests involving children were complications that drew attention from the highest levels of government. He had served the Empress long enough to know she took personal interest in such matters, though he had never understood why. The freighter's hull was scarred with plasma burns and meteor impacts. Whatever the ship had been through, it hadn't been pleasant. The boarding ramp descended with a hydraulic hiss, and a man emerged. He was human, stocky, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent too many years breathing recycled air. In his arms, wrapped in a thermal blanket, was a small figure. "State your business," Ravik said, his hand still on his weapon. "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm requesting immediate asylum for this child under the Zarathian Convention for Protected Persons. This is a royal docking bay. You should have—" Chen's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion bordering on desperation. "I need to see the Empress. Directly. No intermediaries." Ravik almost laughed. "The Empress doesn't grant audiences to cargo haulers. She will for this one." Shen adjusted his grip on the child, who remained silent and still. "Tell her it's about Terran Station 7. Tell her it's about what happened 30 years ago." Terran Station 7 was classified beyond top secret. It was the kind of classification that came with memory wipes for anyone who spoke the name without authorization. The fact that this human knew about it meant either he was an intelligence operative or he possessed information worth killing for. "You need to come with me. Now." Shen didn't resist as Revik's security team surrounded him. They moved through the palace's restricted corridors, past energy barriers and guard posts that could repel a full military assault. The Empress's chamber was at the station's core, protected by technology that made it effectively impregnable. The doors opened, and Revik felt the familiar weight of her presence. Empress Kalthara sat upon her throne, but calling it sitting diminished the reality. She was coiled power, contained only by choice. Her scales shimmered with the deep purple of Zarathian royalty, and her 4 eyes tracked their approach with predatory precision. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her form blending the grace of a dancer with the lethal efficiency of an apex predator. "Majesty," Revik began, "this man claims—" "I know what he claims." Her voice resonated through the chamber, each word precisely articulated. "Captain Chen, it has been a long time." 32 years, Your Majesty. And you bring a gift. Or, reminder, I have not yet decided which. Kalthara descended from her throne, each movement deliberate and controlled. "Show me the child." The child was human, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for such a young face. The child looked directly at the Empress, without fear, without the instinctive terror that most species felt in the presence of Zarathian royalty. Kalthara stopped mid-step, her guards tensed. Revik had served the Empress through wars, assassinations, and political upheavals. He had never seen her hesitate. Never seen her lose the absolute control that defined her rule. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. "It cannot be." The child spoke then, in perfect Zarathian, with an accent that belonged to the old world, the lost world. "Look carefully. Do you remember me?" The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. Revik's combat implants screamed warnings as Kalthara's bioelectric field spiked, the kind of energy signature that preceded violence. "Everyone out," Kalthara said, her voice cutting like a blade. "Everyone except Captain Chen and the child." "Majesty, protocol requires." Revik started out. The word carried the full weight of Imperial command. Revik and his team retreated, the door sealing behind them with a finality that felt like a tomb closing. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, he could only watch as the most powerful being in 3 star systems knelt before a human child and began, impossibly, to weep. Chen set the child down gently, and the small figure walked forward on unsteady legs. Tiny hands reached up toward the Empress's face. "I told you I would come back," the child said. "I told you I would find you again." Kelthara's claws, each one capable of rending through starship hull plating, touched the child's face with impossible gentleness. "Jaren," she breathed. "My Jaren." Ravik's mind reeled. Jaren was a name from history, from the forbidden records of Terran Station 7. Jaren was the name of the human child who had been present during the Krethis incident, the event that had killed 17 billion Zarathians and left their homeworld a radioactive wasteland. Jaren was the name of the child who had supposedly died in the blast, but that child would be 38 years old now, not 6. Inside the chamber, the Empress collapsed. Not defeated, but surrendering to something more powerful than duty or protocol or the weight of empire. She gathered the child into her arms, her massive form curling protectively around the small human body. Chen stepped back, his job complete. He had delivered the impossible, and now he was irrelevant to whatever was unfolding before him. "How?" Kelthara asked. "How are you here? How are you alive? How are you still a child?" "It didn't kill me. It changed me. I've been trying to get back to you. I've been looking for so long." The Empress's second set of eyelids closed, a Zarathian sign of overwhelming emotion. "I searched. I sent thousands of ships. I tore apart space looking for any trace of you. I know. I saw them. But I couldn't reach them. I couldn't make them understand." The child's voice cracked. I tried so hard." Ravik realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in Zarathian history. The Empress, who had ruled with absolute authority for 3 decades, who had rebuilt an empire from ashes, who had conquered and united a dozen species through sheer force of will, was breaking. And somehow, impossibly, that felt right. Chen cleared his throat. "Majesty, there's something else you need to know. The child's aging has been severely altered by the temporal radiation from the Krethis blast. Medical scans suggest he's aging at approximately 1/10 normal human rate, but that's not the critical issue." Jack, Kelthara's head snapped toward him, and Revik saw something terrifying in her eyes. Not anger, but desperate hope. What issue? The same energy that's keeping him young is also killing him. Cellular structure is breaking down. Without treatment, he has maybe 6 months. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Kelthara stood, the child still cradled in her arms, and her voice resonated with the full power of her position. "Assemble every scientist in the Empire, every medical specialist, every temporal physicist, strip resources from wherever necessary. I want them here within the hour. Majesty, some of those specialists are light years away. Then they will travel at maximum burn and damn the cost." She looked down at the child in her arms. "I lost you once to forces beyond my control. I will not lose you again to anything in this universe." It was a tired smile, but genuine. "You became Empress. You rebuilt everything. Someone needed to make sure that what happened to Krethis would never happen again." Kelthara's voice softened. "But every day I wished you were there to see it, to be part of it. I'm here now." "Yes." Kelthara's claws gently stroked the child's hair. "Yes, you are." Revik watched through the viewport as the most powerful being in known space held a dying child and whispered promises in a language he didn't understand. He understood enough, though. He understood that whatever happened next would reshape the Empire. The Empress had spent 3 decades ruling with logic and strategy, building a civilization on the graves of her people. Now she would burn that same civilization to its foundations if it meant saving one small human child. The door opened. Kelthara emerged, still carrying Jaren, her expression transformed into something harder than diamond. "Captain Revik, you will establish a research facility within this station. Level 10 clearance. Unlimited budget. Begin immediately." "Yes, Majesty." "May I ask the objective?" She looked at him, and he saw in her eyes a determination that went beyond military conquest or political maneuvering. "We are going to break the laws of physics, if necessary. We are going to rewrite temporal mechanics. We are going to do whatever it takes." She held the child closer. "Because I made a promise 32 years ago, and I will not break it now. You promised you'd keep me safe, and I failed. But I will not fail twice." Ravik bowed. "It will be done, Majesty." As the Empress carried the child deeper into the palace, Revik began issuing orders. Scientists were roused from their labs. Military vessels were redirected. Resources were allocated with an urgency usually reserved for imminent invasion. The Empire would bend. It would strain. But it would not break. Because the Empress had found what she thought was lost forever, and she would move stars to keep it. Chen approached Revok quietly. I should go. My part is finished. The Empress will want to speak with you. About what happened. About how you found him. I know. I'll stay as long as I'm needed. Chen looked toward where Kelthara had disappeared. I was there, at Terran Station 7. I was part of the diplomatic corps. I saw what happened. What did happen? Chen's expression darkened. Something that should never have been possible. And something that the people responsible will pay for if the Empress has her way. Who was responsible? That's the question, isn't it? Chen turned to leave, then paused. Captain, a word of advice. Whatever you think you know about the Empress, whatever files you've read, whatever briefings you've received, none of it matters now. The woman who emerged from Krethis was forged in grief and necessity. But the person you just saw in that chamber? That's who she was before. And that person is far more dangerous than any Empress could ever be. Revok considered this as Chen walked away. Dangerous how? He wanted to ask, but he already knew the answer. Dangerous because she had something to lose again. Dangerous because she cared. And in his experience, nothing in the universe was more terrifying than someone with power who actually gave a damn. The palace hummed with new urgency. Scientists arrived in waves. Equipment was installed. Data was analyzed. The Empress's orders were absolute. Solve the problem or face consequences that made death seem merciful. In a private medical bay, Kelthara sat beside a small bed where Jaren lay sleeping, monitored by a dozen different machines. She had removed her formal robes and crown, sitting in simple clothing that made her seem less like an Empress and more like what she truly was in this moment. A guardian who had failed once and refused to fail again. A being of immense power, brought to her knees by love. She took Jaren's small hand in her massive clawed one, and whispered promises in the old tongue of Zerathia, the language of her lost world. Promises of protection. Promises of vengeance against whoever had caused this. Promises that defied mortality itself. And as the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, Kelthara made one more promise to herself. She had rebuilt an empire from nothing. She had united species that had warred for millennia. She had imposed peace through strength and wisdom through experience. But if saving this child required burning all of that down, if it demanded sacrificing everything she had built, then she would do so without hesitation. Because 32 years ago she had been a junior diplomat on Terran Station 7. She had been young, idealistic, and completely unprepared for what came next. She had formed an unlikely friendship with a human child, a boy named Jaren, whose parents served in the human contingent. And when the weapons test went catastrophically wrong, when the temporal distortion tore reality apart and consumed her entire world, when billions died in an instant, he had been there. A child of 6, holding her hand as the universe ended, promising her it would be okay. She had survived. He had vanished. She had become Empress because someone needed to ensure it never happened again. And now he was back, dying from the same energy that should have killed them both, and she would not let him go. Not to death. Not to time. Not to anything. The universe had taken enough from her. This time, she would take something back. Jaren's eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light. Kelthara immediately leaned closer, her concern evident despite her attempt to maintain composure. How do you feel? She asked. Tired, but better than before. Jaren's small voice carried the weariness of someone far older. You have a really big room now? And guards. Lots of guards. I am Empress of the Zerathian Empire now. It comes with the position. I liked it better when you were just Kelthara, when we would sneak into the observation deck and watch the stars. A ripple of something like pain crossed the Empress's features. That person died on Krethis. No, she didn't. She's right here. I can see her. Kelthara was silent for a long moment. You should not remember me. You were so young when it happened. The trauma alone should have... I remember everything, Jaren interrupted. The blast froze me somehow. Not just my body. My memories, too. I remember your laugh. I remember you teaching me Zerathian words. I remember you telling me about your homeworld, about the crystal forests and the singing valleys. All gone now. All ash and radiation. I'm sorry. I tried to warn them. I saw the readings on the temporal stabilizer. I knew something was wrong. But I was just a kid. Nobody listened. You tried to warn them? Kelthara's voice sharpened. What do you mean? The scientists. The ones running the weapons test. I was playing near the control room. I saw the numbers weren't matching what they were supposed to be. I told one of the guards, but he just told me to go back to my parents. Kalthara's bioelectric field spiked again, this time with barely contained fury. You knew.
You tried to stop it.
I just knew something was wrong. Then the alarm started. Then you grabbed me and we were running, and then everything went white and wrong, and I couldn't find you anymore. Tears formed in Jaren's eyes. Genuine childlike grief breaking through the strange ancient wisdom the temporal radiation had given him. I looked everywhere. I was trapped in this weird space where time moved wrong. I could see ships passing by, but I couldn't make them see me. It was like being a ghost. I floated through the wreckage of the station for years. Just years and years. Sometimes I'd drift close to a ship and I'd try to call out, but nobody heard. Nobody saw. Kalthara pulled the child close, her rage transforming into protective fury. How did you finally escape? His ship passed through the debris field about a year ago. I managed to interact with his systems, made them malfunction in a pattern. He was smart enough to investigate instead of just running diagnostics. When he found me, I was barely physical. He spent months figuring out how to pull me fully into normal space-time. Then Captain Chen has earned a debt beyond price. He knew who you were. He said he remembered you from before. He said you'd want to know I survived. He was correct. Kalthara's voice carried absolute conviction. But survival is not enough.
You will heal,
You will have the life that was stolen from you. The doctors don't think... I am not making a request. I am stating a fact.
Jaren managed a weak smile.
You're scary when you do that. I am Empress. Scary is part of the job description. But her tone softened. Rest now. I will be here when you wake. You won't leave? Never again? Jaren's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion claiming him once more. Kalthara remained at his side, her hand gently holding his, her expression one of absolute determination. Outside the medical bay, Revik reviewed the incoming reports. Scientists were identifying the problem, though solutions remained elusive. The temporal radiation that had preserved Jaren was also systematically destroying him at the cellular level. Every moment he spent in normal spacetime accelerated the decay. The lead physicist, a Vrathan named Kelsor, approached with evident trepidation. Captain, I need to speak with the Empress. She's not to be disturbed except in emergencies. We've identified a potential treatment path, but it requires resources that may destabilize the Imperial economy. We're talking about constructing a quantum temporal stabilization field that would require the power output of 3-star systems. The energy cost alone would bankrupt a dozen colonies. I'll convey your message. But I'll give you the Empress's response now. Do it. Captain, you don't understand the scale. I understand perfectly. You're asking if saving one child is worth the economic strain on the Empire. Revik met the physicist's eyes. The Empress's answer will be yes, not because she's irrational, not because she's compromised by emotion, but because she has already weighed that cost and found it acceptable. One child against the economic stability of billions is exactly the kind of calculation she refuses to make. The Empress survived genocide. She rebuilt from nothing. She will not accept that saving a single life is impossible, because accepting that means accepting the logic that allowed her world to burn. Revik gestured toward the medical bay. Build your stabilization field. Strip the resources from wherever necessary. The Empress will approve it. Still uncertain but committed to the task. Revik understood his hesitation. In purely logical terms, the cost-benefit analysis was absurd. But logic wasn't what drove empires. Faith was. Loyalty was. The belief that your leader would move heaven and earth for you mattered more than 1,000 economic reports. And right now, the Empress was demonstrating exactly that. Days blurred into weeks. The stabilization field took shape, a massive construct built directly into the palace station. Resources flowed from across the empire. Some colonial governors protested. Those protests were noted and ignored. Jaren's condition stabilized, then marginally improved. Not a cure, but enough to buy time. Enough to hope. During this time, Kalthara rarely left his side. State business was conducted from the medical bay. Diplomatic meetings were held with a dying human child visible in the background. Some saw this as weakness. Most understood it as a warning. The Empress had priorities. Cross them at your peril. Chen remained on the station, providing context and information about the years he had spent searching for and eventually finding Jaren. His story was remarkable. A cargo hauler who had become obsessed with solving the mystery of Terran Station 7, who had spent his personal fortune chasing leads and investigating anomalies. "Why?" Kelthera asked him during one of the brief moments when Jaren slept peacefully. "You had no obligation. The diplomatic mission ended when the station was destroyed. You could have gone on with your life." Chen shrugged. "I was there. I saw what happened. I knew the official story was incomplete, and I remembered you, Kelthara. You were kind to me when other Zarathians treated humans like primitive curiosities. When I found evidence that Jaren might have survived, I couldn't walk away. You spent years on this, your resources." "I'm a cargo hauler. My life is flying between stations, moving goods. This gave me purpose. This gave me a chance to maybe balance the scales a little." Shen looked at the sleeping child. "Besides, I made a promise to his parents before the blast. They asked me to look after him if something happened. Took me longer than expected to fulfill it, but here we are." Kelthara's expression shifted, surprise breaking through her usual control. "His parents ask you specifically?" "They knew the weapons test was dangerous. They couldn't evacuate Jaren themselves without causing political complications, but they could ask someone outside official channels to watch over him." "I agreed. Then everything went to hell." "They were right to trust you. You have my gratitude." "I don't need gratitude, Majesty. I need you to save him. That's all the reward I require." Kelthara's respect for the human deepened. "You will be compensated regardless. And if there is anything you require, I require nothing. Just save the kid." "That's enough." The Empress nodded, accepting his terms. Weeks became months. The stabilization field reached operational status. Jaren was moved into the specially constructed chamber, surrounded by technology that bent space-time around him, creating a pocket of reality where the temporal radiation could be slowly filtered away. The process was agonizing. Jaren would scream as the temporal energy was extracted, his small body convulsing with pain that no medication could fully suppress. Kelthera held him through it all, her massive form wrapped around his small one, absorbing what pain she could through sheer presence. "Make it stop," Jaren begged, during one particularly brutal session. "I cannot, but I can promise it will end. You will survive this." "How do you know?" "Because I will not accept any other outcome." Jaren buried his face against her scales and endured. Ravike observed from outside the chamber, his respect for both the Empress and the child growing with each passing day. The child showed courage that would shame most soldiers. The Empress showed devotion that transcended duty. And slowly and possibly, it worked. The temporal radiation levels decreased. Jaren's cellular structure began to stabilize. His aging, while still abnormally slow, followed a more predictable pattern. The medical team announced cautious optimism. Not a cure, but management. Jaren would need regular treatments, likely for the rest of his life, but he would have a life. He would survive. Kelthara received the news with a kind of relief that made her seem vulnerable for the first time in decades. She thanked the scientists, awarded them honors and resources beyond measure, and then returned to Jaren's side. "You're going to be okay," she told him. Jaren, now stronger and more alert than he had been in months, smiled. "You promised." "I did." "I know. I keep my promises. What happens now?" It was a question Kelthara had considered extensively. Now you heal. Now you grow, as slowly as your condition dictates. Now you learn what happened to the universe while you were lost. Now you decide who you want to be. "I want to stay with you." The simple statement carried weight that threatened to break through Kelthara's control. "You may, for as long as you wish. You are under my protection. You are part of my household. You are—" She hesitated, uncertain how to complete the sentence. "Family?" Jaren suggested. Kelthara's throat tightened. Yes, family. It was a word she hadn't used in 32 years, a concept she had buried with her homeworld. But here, now, with this child who had survived the impossible, it felt right. Jaren hugged her, his small arms barely spanning a fraction of her torso. "I missed you so much. And I you, more than you can understand." As the medical equipment hummed around them, as the stabilization field maintained its protective embrace, Kelthara allowed herself to feel something she had denied for 3 decades. Hope for a future that included more than duty and empire. Hope for connection beyond political necessity. Hope that the universe, cruel as it had been, could still offer moments of grace. Revik entered the chamber quietly. "Majesty, there's been a development." Intelligence has identified the scientists responsible for the faulty weapons test at Terran Station 7. Several are still alive. They've been operating under assumed identities. Kelthara's expression hardened instantly. Where? Various locations. We can have them in custody within days. The Empress looked down at Jaren, who watched her with those two old eyes. What do you think should happen to them? It was an impossible question to ask a child. But Jaren wasn't really a child. Not entirely. The temporal radiation had frozen his body, but not his consciousness. He had spent years in isolation, years to think and observe and understand. They made a mistake, Jaren said slowly. A big one. They should answer for it, but they didn't mean to kill everyone. They were just arrogant. They thought they understood something they didn't. Many would argue that their arrogance deserves death. Maybe, but that won't bring back Kretus. It won't undo what happened. It'll just be more death on top of death. Kelthara considered this. Her first instinct was vengeance. These individuals, through negligence or hubris, had destroyed everything she loved. They deserved to suffer as she had suffered, but Jaren's perspective tempered that rage. The child had suffered too, perhaps even more than her. If he could find space for mercy, perhaps she could as well. They will stand trial, she decided. They will face justice, but not revenge. Justice. Rivik bowed. It will be done, Majesty. After he left, Jaren looked up at her. That was hard for you. Yes. Thank you. For what? For listening. For being the person I remember instead of just being the Empress. Kelthara's expression softened. You bring out parts of me I thought were dead. It is disconcerting but not unwelcome. Over the following months, a routine established itself. Jaren underwent regular treatments but grew stronger. He began studying, learning about the empire Kelthara had built, understanding the political complexities of ruling multiple species across dozens of star systems. He proved remarkably adept at diplomacy. Perhaps it was his unique position, neither child nor adult, neither fully human nor fully temporal anomaly. He could connect with people in ways that surprised even Kelthara. Colonial governors who came to petition the Empress found themselves charmed by the small human who spoke their languages and understood their concerns. Ambassadors discovered that Jaren could articulate complex political positions with a clarity that cut through bureaucratic obfuscation. Chen, before finally departing to return to his cargo routes, observed this transformation with satisfaction. He's going to be something special, he told Kelthara. He already is. He's going to change things. Maybe even change the Empire. The Empire does not need changing, Chen smiled. Every empire needs changing, Majesty. It's called progress. And that kid has perspectives nobody else has. He's seen the worst of what can happen when people don't listen. He's experienced isolation that would break most adults. And he's still kind.
Still hopeful. That's power you can't build with warships or political maneuver.
Kelthara recognized the truth in his words. You have wisdom beyond your station, Captain Chen. I'm a cargo hauler who spent years chasing a ghost. I've had time to think. He extended his hand in the human gesture of farewell. Take care of him. And let him take care of you too. I think you both need it. She took his hand carefully, aware of her strength. You are welcome in my palace whenever you wish. You have earned that right. I'll take you up on that someday. Good luck, Majesty. As Chen's ship departed, Kelthara felt an odd sense of completion. The man who had returned Jaren to her was free to resume his life. The debt was acknowledged but not burdensome. It was a clean ending to one chapter. But Jaren's story was just beginning. Years passed, though for Jaren they passed slowly. His aging continued at the reduced rate, meaning that while others grew and changed, he remained physically young. It was frustrating for him at times, being trapped in a child's body while his mind matured. But it also gave him unique advantages. He became Kelthara's unofficial advisor on matters requiring a different perspective. When military officials proposed aggressive expansion, Jaren would quietly note the humanitarian costs. When economic ministers prioritized efficiency over welfare, Jaren would highlight the communities that would suffer. He didn't always change policy, but he always made Kelthara think, and thinking, she had learned, was essential to good governance. On the anniversary of Kretus' destruction, Kelthara and Jaren stood before a memorial she had commissioned. It was a simple structure, a column of light rising from the palace floor, containing the names of every individual who had died in the blast. 17 billion names. It took hours to read them all, even with advanced display technology. I come here every year, Kelthara said quietly, to remember, to ensure I never forget what was lost. I hope so. I'd built it in their memory. Every law, every treaty, every protection, all designed to ensure this never happens again. Jaren took her hand. You succeeded. The Empire is safer because of you. But 17 billion still died. That failure can never be undone. No. But their deaths weren't meaningless. You gave them meaning by building something better. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher. She taught me that strength and compassion aren't opposites, that you can be powerful and still care. The Empress felt something wet on her face and realized she was crying. She hadn't cried since the day she found Jaren again. But here, surrounded by the names of her lost people, with this impossible child who had survived the unsurvivable, the emotions overwhelmed her, carefully maintained control. Jaren hugged her, and they stood together in the light of 17 billion memories. Later, as they returned to the palace proper, Jaren asked, "What happens when I finally grow up? When I'm not a kid anymore? What do you want to happen?" "I want to help. Really help. Not just be your advisor. I want to do something that matters." Kelthara considered this. The Empire always needs people who care. People who understand the cost of failure. People who have seen the worst and still choose hope. She paused. When you are ready, when you have grown into whoever you will become, there will be a place for you. Not because of who you were to me, but because of who you are. Promise? I promise. It was a promise she would keep. As Jaren aged, slowly but inevitably, he proved himself remarkable. He studied history, politics, science, and warfare. He learned languages and customs from dozens of species. He developed relationships with individuals across the Empire, building networks of trust and understanding. And when he finally reached physical adulthood, decades after he should have, he had become something unique in the galaxy, a human who understood Zarathian culture as deeply as his own, a temporal anomaly who viewed time differently than any other being, a survivor who refused to be defined by trauma. The Empire recognized his value. He was offered positions of authority, but he declined them. Instead, he created his own role: mediator, investigator, truth seeker. When disputes arose that official channels couldn't resolve, Jaren would intervene. When mysteries needed solving, he would investigate. When someone needed to speak uncomfortable truths to power, he would do so. And Kelthara, the Empress who had ruled with absolute authority for decades, listened to him, not because she had to, but because she trusted him, because he had earned that trust through years of wisdom and compassion. On the 50th anniversary of the Kretus incident, Jaren stood before the Galactic Council as an independent observer. He was there to present findings on weapons development across the Empire, to ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. His speech was simple and powerful. He spoke of what had been lost. He spoke of the responsibility that came with advanced technology. He spoke of the need for oversight and caution and humility. And when he finished, the council, composed of beings from 20 different species, many of whom had never agreed on anything, voted unanimously to implement stricter controls on experimental weapons. It was unprecedented. It was historic. It was Jaren being exactly who he was meant to be. Kelthara watched from the diplomatic gallery, and for the first time in 50 years, she felt that perhaps Kretus had not died in vain. If that tragedy had led to this moment, if it had created this person who could change hearts and minds across the galaxy, then perhaps there was meaning in the suffering after all. That evening, in the privacy of the palace, Jaren found Kelthara on the observation deck where they used to sit when he was truly a child. "You're proud of me," he observed. "Excessively so. It is unseemly for an empress to show such obvious favoritism." "And yet you do it anyway?" "I am allowed occasional lapses in dignity." She looked at him, seeing both the child she had found again and the man he had become. "You have exceeded every expectation. You have become someone who changes the galaxy for the better. I learned from the best." Jaren sat beside her, comfortable in the silence that had developed between them over decades. "Do you ever regret it, taking me in? The resources you spent? The political capital?" "Not once. Not even for an instant. Even though you could have used those resources to help millions? You are not just anything. You are proof that individuals matter, that one life can be worth saving regardless of cost. That calculation and efficiency are not the highest virtues." Kelthara turned to face him fully. "You taught me to be more than an empress. You reminded me how to be Kelthara. That is worth more than 1,000 efficient policies." Jaren smiled, that same smile he had given her decades ago when he first said, "Look carefully. Do you remember me?" "I remember when you could hold me in one arm," he said. You were significantly smaller, and less argumentative. I was also dying.
Yes. And now you live.
Now you thrive. Now you change the universe. Kelthara's voice carried profound satisfaction. We have come far from that day in the docking bay, but some things haven't changed. Such as my family's. You're still the one I turn to when I need wisdom or comfort or just someone who understands. Kelthara felt that tightness in her throat again, that vulnerability she had learned to accept in his presence. And you are still the light that pulled me back from darkness, still the reminder that there is more to existence than duty and survival. Still my Jaren. They sat together watching stars that neither of them had seen in their original forms. Kelthara's stars were ash. Jaren's stars had moved during his temporal imprisonment. But here, now, they could appreciate the beauty of distant light without grief-overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you," Jaren said eventually, "for never giving up, for spending everything to save me, for believing I was worth it. Thank you for coming back, for reminding me why I built this empire, for showing me that compassion and strength are not mutually exclusive." Kelthara placed her hand over his, the size difference still dramatic but no longer defining. "We saved each other, I think. Neither of us would be who we are without the other." "No," Jaren agreed. "We wouldn't." The stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the drama of mortal lives. But here, on this station orbiting a dead world, two beings who should never have survived, an empress forged in genocide and a child frozen in time, had created something new. Not just survival, but meaning. Not just existence, but connection. Not just power, but love. And in a universe that often seemed designed for cruelty, that was its own form of defiance. That was its own form of victory. That was everything.